Hey YouTube, before we start this, there's a few things you should know. The first 10 minutes of this video will be me summarizing everything. If you are an experienced player, all you need to do is watch this and then boot up the POB and just follow it and you're good. The rest of the guide is going to explain every single thing in detail so that even those new to the game can pick it up and follow it. I do recommend having the video on in the background, because in order to max out every single possible thing on the lowest budget possible, there's some very specific numbers that we have to hit. Everything for this took a lot of time to prepare, with my cats getting sick, they had ear mites, and work getting a bit hectic. I may miss a thing or two, so please feel free to ask anything you want in the comments or tag me in the Discord with any questions or help that you might need. Let's begin. So first, a little overview of things. I felt a lot of FOMO in Affliction League because I didn't get to play around with all the new insane Spectre corpses that they added into the game, and upon seeing them adding new Spectres this league too, I thought, okay, I want a minion build that I could add and test different Spectres on. So I went with the Warmancer because it's very easy to test different things on. Other setups just didn't feel as tanky or as strong as I thought they could be with minimal investment. So this is my take on how to fully perfect and optimize the build with as much tankiness and damage at the lowest prices possible. Every single thing, including the POBs, gear crafts, gear price breakdowns, are in a spreadsheet in the description, as well as posted in my Discord in the POB and guides text channel. If you struggle with crafting gear, a full video explaining how to craft each piece of gear for this build, including the Animate Guardians build. It will be uploaded alongside this guide, so if you have trouble, go take a look. Now enough delaying, let's get into the meat of it. So, the core of the build relies on having an army of minions fighting for you. We have 12 raised zombies, 13 skeletons, 11 phantasms, a carrion golem, an animate guardian, and 4 raised spectres in the true budget POB. We scale our damage using a bunch of minions deal increased damage modifiers on our gear and our passive tree, as well as converting all of their damage to cold damage to make it even easier to scale with support gems like Bone Chill. There are a total of 6 different spectres that we'll be using throughout. You will start by using Moon Dancers from early acts all throughout the campaign. Now these spectres will carry you through everything. They're very strong in the early game. The playstyle is fairly simple. You convocate the spectres right on top of the packs, they kill everything, you move forward. If you want to play safer, you can convocate in front of the pack and let your minions run at them instead. Once your Spectre gem lets you have 3 spectres, you will add a Spectral Leader. This is a new tier 17 Spectre, and this guy, although a bit squishy, gives you a 20% increase action speed buff to everyone around him. So that includes you, your Spectres, and all your other minions as well. Now this trio will carry you through white maps, yellow maps very easily, along with your zombies and skeletons, of course. And as you're finishing your yellow maps, Moon Dancers will start to feel a bit weak, as scaling their damage is a bit difficult. So you will stop using Moon Dancers and you will instead switch to using support spectres for your zombies and skeletons instead. These will go in a hungry loop instead, that you'll be leveling gems for over time, or you can just buy the gems for them. The spectres in this setup will be a Spectral Leader, a Primal Clutch Claw, and a Carnage Chieftain. Once your minion gem is high enough level, you'll be able to fit in a 4th Spectre, which will be an Arena Master. You can swap out the Arena Master for the War Caller Spectre instead, but I personally don't like him. He is way too squishy and dies a lot. Spectres from maximum clear speed. Once you have 4 Spectres and you're in tier 16 maps, you have a good wand, you have a good shield, you will be using the Defiler setup in a different hungry loop. This setup involves having 2 wretched Defilers, a Carnage Chieftain, and a Spectral Leader. Note that this hungry loop does have spell echo, so be careful when you're raising your Spectres. If you don't know how to do that, then there is a timestamp in this video where I'll be showing you how to raise Spectres with Spell Echo. If you don't know how to get Spectres, it's very simple. You go and you ask someone who already has them. As long as you're standing in the same hideout or area as that person, you can use Desecrate to summon corpses, and those corpses will have the Spectres that you want. You can also go to tier 17 maps to get them, but that's not ideal. So go and type /global666 in the chat and you'll be taken to the Necromancer channel, and just ask for whatever Spectres you want, and whoever has them will invite you. Go to their hideouts, get them, that's it. Okay, for our class in Ascendancy, we're going to be a witch. We will ascend into a Necromancer, obviously. We start by taking Commander of Darkness, which gives all of our minions attack and cast speed per aura we have, which also scales with aura effect, and a bunch of damage and resistances to both our minions and us. We then take Mindless Aggression, which further scales both our minions' tankiness and their damage. After that, we take Mistress of Sacrifice, which allows our offering skills to affect us at a lower level, as well as increasing the duration of our skills. The offering we used in this build is Bone Offering, which gives us a very substantial amount of attack and spell block, but more on that afterwards. For our last Ascendancy point, we will take Bone Barrier, not to be confused with Bone Offering. Bone Barrier gives us a good chunk of physical damage reduction per minion we have, up to a max of 10. The main thing here is minions leeching life to us, which gives us a massive amount of health sustain, and minions getting a very large amount of energy shield to boost their defenses, letting them stay on full life for most encounters. The gem and gear setup is fairly straightforward. We have a +2 minion helmet with resistances, which is very easy to gravecraft in this league. Or a full grave crafting recipes are in the spreadsheet, so be sure to take a look at those. In it, we have our Culling Strike Golem and Phantasms linked with minion damage. For boots, we use an energy shield base and have our defensive auras, Determination and Petrified Blood, along with Convocation and Frostbite. We cast this curse manually as well as Convocation. If you want, you can replace the minion damage link in the helmet with Frostbite to free up a slot in the boots and use Automate support. This will cast Convocation for you, making this essentially a no-button build, except for occasionally casting Haste and Summon Skeletons. For our wand, it is a +1 minion gem wand, with everything focused on minion damage, and an open suffix for our trigger setup for Bone Offering. Now, these wands are very cheap to gravecraft or buy, it's up to you. We also have Hatred linked with Generosity to give our minions a boosted Hatred aura. The shield is similar. We have a Spirit Shield for minion damage and +1 minion skills. In it, we link Divine Blessing and Haste, and an unlinked Tempest Shield. This shield will be expensive to buy, but insanely cheap to craft using graves again, so gravecraft these, please. Our gloves are going to be the Triad Grip, mandatory for our build. We will be using 4 green sockets to convert all of our minions' physical damage to cold damage, and since we can only use green sockets here, we have to unfortunately have Dash as our movement skill, linked with Second Wind to get 2 uses. We also have Precision and Desecrate here as well. The body armor, which will be a brass dome. This gives us a significant amount of tankiness and elemental resistances, maximum elemental resistances. Coloring this is difficult. To understand how to do it easily, please go take a look at the crafting video. In the armor, we have our main 6-link setup with Raise Zombie, Fall Summon Skeletons, Minion Damage, Bone Chill, Elemental Damage with attacks, and melee physical damage. You will be swapping out melee physical damage for melee splash while mapping. It is not necessary with the Defiler setup, but feels more comfortable in my opinion. The rings will both be Hungry Loops. As I mentioned before, we will be using multiple Hungry Loop setups for our build. One will be the permanent loop with our Enemy Guardian. We will not be taking this loop off at any point. The other one will be for our clearing setup or our bossing setup. For the Defiler clearing setup, we will be using minion damage, Spell Echo, Pierce, returning projectiles. For the Warmancer single target setup, you'll be using minion damage, bone chill, elemental damage with attacks, and melee physical damage. If you do not know how to link gems in your Hungry Loop, it is also covered in the crafting video. The amulet slot is for a Jinx Juju in the low budget, and an Ashes of the Stars in the true budget. We will have Charisma as our Anoint for mana reservation and aura effect. You can drop an aura in the low budget and skip this Anoint to save up for an Ashes. They're much cheaper now after the nerfs anyway. The belt is going to be a Darkness Enthroned. The budget for this is quite flexible. You can get a low roll one for as low as 5C, or a high roll one for a Divine, maybe 2, and a max roll one for even more. However, that is not necessary. Buy this based on whatever your current budget is. In this, we will have our best Ghastly jewels. Now, let's go over the jewels for a moment. The jewels for this build are the most important part. Why? Because that is where we get everything that we need. Now, don't get scared, these will be very cheap jewels that you can buy for anywhere between 1 to 10C. You don't need a single damage mod on these jewels. However, if you can get damage mods, that's even better. You primarily just want resistances and attributes on your jewels. Damage is great, but you don't need it. The belt will have your strongest Ghastly jewels, as I mentioned, and the rest of your tree will have either Ghastly jewels or Cobalt jewels. These are the ones that can roll minion mods on them. Ideally, you want to look for hybrid resistances, hybrid strength and dex, and stuff like that. The minimum stats that we need for the build are 98 dex, so that we can have a max level hatred. However, even more dexterity will give you a higher level haste. So the more dexterity you have, the better, up until a max of 150. 177 strength for our brass dome, and a combined energy shield and unreserved mana pool equal to 505. Okay, this will let you cast haste comfortably. Okay, so that means you can have 490 energy shield and 25 unreserved mana, and that'll let you cast haste with a level 1 divine blessing. Okay, and on top of that you need 80% elemental resistances, so any resists that are not being covered by your boots and your helmet will be on the jewels. Chaos res is up to you. I personally prefer 30 to 40% chaos res, but this league you can get capped chaos res using tattoos. Just be careful not to drop your energy shield pool too low by replacing too many int nodes with chaos res tattoos. In the true budget POB, we will also be using a cluster jewel setup. You can fix your stats in the end there as well and replace some of your other jewels with more damage oriented ones. We use a 8 passive minion damage large cluster at lower levels, and we upgrade to a 11 or 12 passive one at higher levels. We don't want any passive skills, we only want attack speed for minions, and then life / chaos res / resistances or attributes. In the medium cluster, we want a 4 passive minion life cluster with more useful stats, and a blessed rebirth passive. For the final small cluster, we will use a 3 passive mana reservation cluster with spiteful presence to reserve hatred and other useful stats on the small passives as well. Flasks are fairly straightforward. We use a basalt flask for armor and a Rumi's concoction for block. We use a 14% physical damage taken as cold damage, taste of hate. A max roll one is way too expensive and unnecessary. A life flask with instant recovery and corrupted blood immunity. Our last slot is fairly flexible. I recommend Topaz if you are farming Eater Altars, or an Amethyst flask to cap your chaos res, or a Quicksilver flask for more movement speed. It's up to you. Enchant all of your flasks with reused at the end of flask effect, so you just have to use them once and then they will keep looping on themselves as long as you have flask charges. For flask mods, prefixes will be charge gain on hit. With the suffix we want reduced curse effect, or increased movement speed, and increased armor. The playstyle for the build is very simple. Map starts, you use Desecrate and you cast Haste. This also triggers Bone Offering. Pop all your flasks once and then you run in, spam Convocate off cooldown or it auto spams for you if you use automation, randomly cast summon skeletons every 4 seconds, and haste every 15 seconds, and just watch everything die. I also just like to spam my life flask because I don't like the petrified blood half HP for seeing a nice full red bar, so I use life flask. I have it on my mouse button so I can just keep on spamming that as I'm moving. Pretty easy. For bosses, exactly the same thing. However, I do not recommend using automate convocation for bossing. You want to convocate your minions right on top of the boss and then move away and just spam curses. A tip for minion builds: minion AI is strange. Your minions go where you are casting or moving, so I like spamming Frostbite so they stay where I'm casting and they don't keep following me if I'm running around. And the tip is that you want to keep convocating your minions right on top of bosses. This is because the damage numbers that you see in the POB, that is the damage of every single minion hitting the boss at once. So all of your zombies, all your skeletons, all your phantasms, your guardians, and your spectres hitting the same target. Now, this is difficult at times because your minions can block each other a little bit, right? So we want to convocate everything right on top of the boss so that all of them start hitting it at once. Another thing is convocation does not affect skeletons and phantasms. It only affects your permanent minions. So if you cast skeletons, they do not follow you. They stay and hit whatever is nearest to them. So if the boss moved, you want to cast your skeletons again on wherever the boss moved to. Your phantasms, they just go wherever they want to go. You can't really control them. Now I have 3 different tiers of this build. One is the very poop budget build that you have as you're getting done with the campaign. The items in this build shouldn't cost you any more than a few chaos. Then we have the low budget version, which is shown in the build showcase footage. This should cost a max of about 2 to 3 divines, most of which is the Amulet Anoint. You can drop an aura and skip that if you want. Then we have the absolute powerhouse true budget. This is what I am currently running in the footage you're seeing in the background. It is around an 8 to 20 divine budget. Price of that is varied because of the Anime Guardian gear and if you're self-crafting gear or not. You can use a much cheaper gear and still do roughly the same damage, just with less clear speed for mapping, but that's fixed with the different Spectre setups. You can scale this build infinitely with Giga Minion helmets and insane 35% increased effect clusters and all that stuff, but I won't be going into that since I want this to be as simple and as strong for every person to be able to follow. That's all for the summary. Good luck. You can get the POBs in the description, and now I'll be going over much in-depth explanations on how the build functions and how everything goes. So let's get into that in game and talk about it.